What if the biggest mystery in Avengers Doomsday isn't how Doctor Doom wins, but why he has the face of the one hero the entire Marvel Universe trusted the most? Because after years of rumors, fan theories, and endless speculation, Marvel may have just dropped its clearest hint yet, and strangely enough, it wasn't in a trailer, a poster, or an official announcement. It happened during a simple interview at Comic-Con, where one question managed to make two of Marvel's biggest stars instantly change their expressions. And sometimes, what people refuse to say tells you far more than anything they actually do. For months, fans have been asking the same question ever since Robert Downey Jr.'s shocking return was announced. If Victor Von Doom looks exactly like Tony Stark, how can the Avengers possibly ignore it? How can characters like Steve Rogers, Peter Parker, Rhodey, Pepper, or even Happy Hogan look at him without feeling like they're staring at a ghost? That's not a small continuity detail, that's an emotional earthquake. And now, for the first time, Marvel may have quietly confirmed that this question isn't being ignored at all. During the Comic-Con interviews, the cast gathered together to celebrate everything coming next in the MCU. The atmosphere was light, everyone was joking, and the conversation flowed naturally. Until one reporter asked the question every Marvel fan had been waiting to hear. Would the heroes actually acknowledge that Victor Von Doom has Tony Stark's face? And would that resemblance become one of the emotional foundations of Avengers Doomsday? For just a brief moment, everything changed. Neither Robert Downey Jr. nor Chris Evans answered directly. They didn't laugh it off. They didn't deny it. They didn't even try to redirect the conversation with one of Marvel's usual playful responses. Instead, both actors immediately made it clear that they couldn't talk about that subject. It was the kind of answer that sounds incredibly simple on the surface, but underneath it carries enormous weight. Marvel actors have spent years protecting spoilers, but they're also trained to dismiss fake theories without giving them credibility. Here they did something different. They treated the question like it was dangerous territory, and that's exactly why fans immediately started paying attention. Think about what that reaction really means. If Doctor Doom simply happened to share Tony Stark's face for no meaningful reason, there would be nothing to protect. They could easily have laughed and said, "You'll have to watch the movie," or even brushed it aside as clever casting. Instead, both actors refused to touch the subject entirely. That suggests the resemblance isn't just cosmetic, it's woven directly into the story itself. Marvel understands something incredibly important about its audience. Tony Stark wasn't just another Avenger, he was the emotional heart of the Infinity Saga. His sacrifice in Endgame wasn't simply the end of a character, it was the conclusion of an entire era. Bringing Robert Downey Jr. back without acknowledging what Tony meant would immediately weaken that ending. Marvel knows that. The Russo brothers know that. Robert Downey Jr. certainly knows that. Which is why this casting choice almost certainly exists to create emotional conflict rather than erase emotional history. The MCU isn't trying to tell us Tony never mattered. It's trying to force its heroes to confront someone who looks exactly like the man who once saved everything, but now stands ready to destroy it. That idea becomes even more fascinating when you consider how Doctor Doom is expected to appear throughout most of the film. Multiple reports suggest that Doom will spend nearly the entire movie hidden behind his iconic mask. If that's true, Marvel is making a very deliberate creative decision. Robert Downey Jr.'s face is one of the most recognizable faces in cinematic history. If audiences barely see it, then Marvel isn't bringing him back simply for nostalgia. They're saving that reveal because every single time the mask comes off, it has to matter. Imagine Doom ruling from his castle, surrounded only by loyal followers who already know his identity. In those moments, removing the mask isn't shocking. But picture something completely different. Imagine one of Earth's greatest heroes finally confronting Doom after an exhausting battle. The mask slowly comes off, and standing there is Tony Stark's face. Suddenly, the fight isn't just physical anymore. It's emotional. Every memory from Iron Man, Civil War, Infinity War, and Endgame comes rushing back in a single instant. The heroes aren't looking at Tony. They know this isn't Tony, but their hearts don't care about logic in that moment. Emotion always reacts before reason does. And if there's one person Marvel could use to maximize that emotional impact, it might be Steve Rogers. Out of everyone in the MCU, no relationship carried more weight than the one between Steve and Tony. They fought beside each other. They fought against each other. They disagreed on almost everything, yet in the end, they trusted each other enough to save the universe together. Their friendship wasn't perfect, and that's exactly why it felt real. Imagine Steve finally standing face to face with Doom, expecting another battle against another villain, only for the mask to reveal the face of his oldest friend. For just a fraction of a second, hesitation would be unavoidable. Not because Steve believes Tony has returned, but because grief has a way of reopening wounds you thought had already healed. Even the strongest heroes aren't immune to that. Suddenly, Doom gains something more dangerous than physical strength. He gains psychological power. Every decision becomes harder. Every punch becomes heavier. Every victory feels painful. And that may be precisely why Marvel wanted Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr. to avoid answering that Comic-Con question. Because once fans understand that emotional setup, they immediately begin predicting scenes that Marvel desperately wants to keep hidden until opening night. This also explains why Robert Downey Jr.'s return reportedly came with one of the biggest contracts in Marvel Studios' history. Dr. Doom isn't just another villain who appears for a single crossover before disappearing forever. Victor Von Doom is often considered Marvel's most layered antagonist because his greatest weapon has never been raw strength alone. Doom wins by understanding people. He manipulates emotions. He exploits fear. He studies weaknesses that other villains never even notice. Casting Robert Downey Jr. transforms those qualities into something even more terrifying. Every conversation Doom has with an Avenger automatically carries emotional baggage before he even says a word. Marvel didn't simply hire one of its biggest stars again because audiences love him. They hired the one actor whose presence alone changes every interaction on screen. That's a storytelling advantage almost no other casting decision could create. If Doom looked like a completely different person, the Avengers would simply fight another powerful enemy. But because he resembles Tony Stark, every encounter becomes deeply personal before the battle even begins. That doesn't necessarily mean Tony Stark himself is coming back in Avengers Doomsday. In fact, current expectations suggest Marvel may be saving Tony's true return for something even bigger. If the rumors surrounding Avengers Secret Wars prove accurate, then the emotional payoff may not arrive until Battleworld itself. According to these reports, Doom's reality will reshape existence into a broken collection of kingdoms where countless heroes no longer remember who they truly are. Memories will have been rewritten, histories erased, entire lives replaced with carefully constructed illusions. And somewhere inside this fractured reality, two of Marvel's most beloved characters may unknowingly cross paths: Loki and Tony Stark. Not as old allies, remembering everything they've survived, but as strangers living inside Doom's manufactured world, unaware that reality itself has been stolen from them. That's an incredibly different type of storytelling than anything Marvel has attempted before. Instead of heroes assembling because they already know each other, they'll have to rediscover who they once were. They'll have to earn their own identities all over again. Imagine how emotionally powerful that could become. Somewhere within Battleworld sits a luxurious casino, alive with music, bright lights, and people completely unaware that their universe is artificial. Inside, Loki and Tony exist like ordinary citizens, carrying no memory of New York, no memory of Thanos, no memory of the Infinity Stones, and certainly no memory of sacrificing everything to save existence. To them, those events never happened. But outside this illusion, a resistance begins forming. Heroes who somehow escape Doom's manipulation slowly gather together, searching across Battleworld for everyone they've lost. Their greatest mission isn't defeating Doom, not yet. Their first objective is restoring memory itself. One by one, forgotten heroes must be reminded of who they really are. And if Marvel follows this direction, Tony Stark's return won't simply be another surprise cameo. It will become a story about identity, sacrifice, and rediscovering the man who once chose the universe over himself. The fascinating part is that this resistance wouldn't simply be fighting an army. They'd be fighting a lie. Every hero they encounter would already believe they were exactly where they belonged. Imagine trying to convince someone that their entire life is fake. Imagine telling Tony Stark that the memories he treasures never actually happened, that the world around him was built by Dr. Doom, and that somewhere beyond this illusion, billions of lives have been erased. That's not a conversation anyone accepts in 5 minutes. It's a psychological battle. And that's exactly what makes Secret Wars feel like the perfect place for Tony Stark's true comeback rather than Doomsday. In Doomsday, the emotional weapon is Doom's face. In Secret Wars, the emotional weapon becomes Tony's own forgotten identity. Those are two completely different stories, but together they create one incredible arc. First, Marvel forces the heroes to confront the image of the man they lost. Then, much later, it gives them the opportunity to actually find that man again. If these rumors are accurate, Marvel isn't repeating Endgame. It's asking an entirely different question. What happens when a hero doesn't remember being a hero at all? And that idea becomes even stronger when you remember who's expected to be standing beside Tony inside Battleworld. Loki's journey has been one of the most dramatic transformations in the entire MCU. He began as a villain desperate for a throne, became a reluctant ally, evolved into someone capable of genuine sacrifice, and eventually accepted perhaps the greatest burden anyone in the multiverse has ever carried. By the end of Loki Season 2, he wasn't sitting on a throne because he wanted power. He was holding reality together because no one else could. If Battleworld somehow separates him from that responsibility and erases his memories alongside everyone else's, then Loki and Tony become two men who once carried impossible burdens without realizing who they truly are anymore. There's something beautifully poetic about that pairing. Both men spent years trying to outrun their past mistakes. Both eventually chose sacrifice over selfishness. And now both may have to rediscover those same qualities from scratch. The resistance wouldn't simply be recruiting powerful fighters. They'd be trying to awaken the very people capable of inspiring everyone else. That's a far more emotional foundation than simply gathering heroes for another final battle. Of course, before any of that can happen, Avengers. Doomsday has to establish just how overwhelming Dr. Doom really is. Marvel has spent years introducing powerful villains, but Doom has always belonged in a different category. Thanos conquered through overwhelming force and absolute conviction. Kang threatened reality through endless versions of himself. Doom, however, has always been something far more unpredictable because his greatest victories rarely begin on the battlefield. They begin in people's minds. If Doom understands that his own face resembles Tony Stark's, there's no chance he ignores that advantage. In fact, he may weaponize it. Imagine him choosing the exact moment to reveal himself, not because he needs to, but because he knows it will emotionally destabilize the heroes standing in front of him. Steve Rogers hesitates. Rhodey freezes. Peter Parker struggles to process what he's seeing. For a few crucial seconds, Doom gains complete control of the situation without throwing a single punch. That's classic Victor Von Doom. He doesn't simply defeat his enemies physically, he convinces them to defeat themselves. Peter Parker may actually represent one of the most heartbreaking possibilities in that scenario. Ever since Spider-Man No Way Home, Peter has been carrying an impossible burden. The entire world has forgotten who he is. The people he loved most no longer remember him. He's already experienced isolation on a level few MCU characters ever have. Now imagine Peter coming face to face with someone who has Tony Stark's face. Tony wasn't just another Avenger to Peter, he was his mentor, the man who believed in him before the rest of the world did, and ultimately the father figure Peter lost twice, first emotionally, then permanently. Peter understands better than almost anyone that appearances can be deceptive, but emotions don't disappear simply because logic tells you they should. Seeing Doom's face could reopen every wound Peter thought he'd finally learned to live with, and Doom, being as intelligent as he is, would almost certainly recognize that vulnerability. That's what makes this concept so frightening. Every major Avenger carries a different emotional connection to Tony Stark, and Doom potentially gains access to every one of those emotional weaknesses simply by existing. Marvel also seems to be expanding that larger picture through some of the biggest announcements to emerge from Comic-Con. One of the most exciting confirmations revolves around Ghost Rider, a character fans have wanted back in live action for years. According to the latest reports, Ryan Gosling is set to step into the role of Johnny Blaze, with a standalone Ghost Rider film targeting a 2028 release under Sean Levy, the director who recently delivered Deadpool and Wolverine. On paper, that's already an exciting combination. But the speculation doesn't stop there. Rumors now suggest Marvel may introduce this version of Ghost Rider even earlier, possibly inside Avengers, Doomsday itself. If that happens, Ghost Rider won't simply appear as another superhero arriving late to the party. He could become part of a much larger strategy unfolding behind the scenes while Doom dominates the primary battlefield. That possibility ties directly into another fascinating rumor that Loki may secretly be assembling his own hidden alliance across the multiverse. While the main Avengers struggle against Doom's unstoppable forces, Loki could be searching for heroes who exist outside Doom's expectations. Heroes powerful enough, unpredictable enough, or simply forgotten enough to become the final wildcard in the war. Think about how satisfying that structure would be. The audience spends most of the movie believing Doom has already accounted for every possible threat. Every major hero has been defeated, captured, manipulated, or pushed to the edge of failure. Victory feels impossible. Then, when everything appears lost, a completely unexpected team emerges from the shadows. Not because they arrived by accident, but because Loki had been quietly preparing this moment from the very beginning. That transforms his role from passive observer into master strategist, someone playing a game almost as complex as Doom's own. If Ryan Gosling's Ghost Rider really joins that hidden team, Marvel instantly gains one of its most visually spectacular and spiritually unique heroes. Ghost Rider has always occupied a strange corner of Marvel mythology because his powers aren't rooted in advanced technology, cosmic science, or mutant genetics. They come from supernatural forces that often operate beyond conventional understanding. That's important because Doom's greatest strength usually lies in controlling systems, political systems, magical systems, technological systems, even reality itself. Ghost Rider introduces an entirely different kind of power into that equation. The spirit of vengeance doesn't always follow the rules everyone else depends on. That unpredictability alone could make him one of Doom's most dangerous opponents. And if Marvel truly wants audiences to erupt inside theaters, there may be one moment capable of accomplishing exactly that. Imagine the battlefield already collapsing under Doom's control. Heroes are exhausted. Hope has nearly disappeared. Then another motorcycle engine echoes across the battlefield. The flames are different. The silhouette feels familiar. Out of the fire steps Nicolas Cage's Ghost Rider, returning one final time not to reclaim the spotlight but to pass it forward. Rather than treating previous Marvel films as something disconnected, Marvel could embrace its multiversal possibilities completely. Cage's Johnny Blaze meeting Ryan Gosling's version wouldn't just be fan service. It would symbolize the passing of one generation to the next, acknowledging Marvel's cinematic history while opening the door toward its future. A brief exchange, a shared understanding between two writers carrying the same curse across different universes could become one of the most memorable moments in the entire multiverse saga. And because Secret Wars is fundamentally about worlds colliding, that kind of crossover suddenly feels more believable than ever before. While Ghost Rider represents one exciting future for Marvel, another major announcement points toward the continued evolution of Wakanda. Black Panther 3 has now officially entered the conversation, and perhaps its biggest development involves the future of the Black Panther mantle itself. According to current reports, Prince T'Challa, the son of King T'Challa, will eventually become the next Black Panther, with David Johnson expected to portray the character. That's a particularly meaningful choice because Johnson has already built a reputation for delivering emotionally grounded performances rather than relying purely on spectacle. And that matters, because becoming Black Panther has never simply been about wearing the suit. Every person who carries that mantle inherits generations of responsibility, sacrifice, and impossible expectations. Whoever steps into that role has to convince audiences, not just physically, but emotionally. If Marvel is truly planning to build the next era around Prince T'Challa, then his journey can't begin with victory. It has to begin with profound loss. That possibility immediately brings the conversation back to Avengers, Doomsday, because right now, Shuri is still Wakanda's Black Panther. She carries the legacy her brother left behind, but she also carries the responsibility of protecting an entire nation during what could become the greatest multiversal crisis in history. If Doom truly emerges as the central force threatening every corner of existence, then Wakanda will never be able to stay neutral. Its resources, its technology, and its strategic importance make it one of the first places Doom would want under his control. And if Marvel intends for Prince T'Challa to eventually inherit the mantle, then something significant almost has to happen to Shuri before that future can exist. It doesn't necessarily mean she has to die, but the possibility of Doom becoming directly responsible for the greatest tragedy Wakanda has faced since T'Challa's passing would immediately raise the emotional stakes of everything that follows. Instead of simply introducing a new Black Panther because time has moved on, Marvel would be creating a deeply personal motivation for Prince T'Challa to rise. His journey wouldn't begin with destiny. It would begin with grief, justice, and the responsibility of protecting the legacy his family sacrificed everything to preserve. That theory becomes even more compelling when you examine the small details audiences have already started discussing from the early promotional material surrounding Doomsday. One relationship continues to stand out above all the others: Shuri and Namor. Ever since Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, their alliance has never truly been built on trust. They reached an understanding because circumstances demanded it, not because old wounds had healed. Namor remains one of the MCU's most unpredictable leaders. He protects Talokan above everything else, and history has repeatedly shown that if he believes an alliance serves his kingdom, he won't hesitate to make difficult choices. That's exactly why some fans believe Doom could exploit that relationship. Imagine Doom approaching Namor with a proposal that appears to guarantee Talokan's survival while the multiverse collapses around everyone else. From Namor's perspective, protecting his people has always outweighed protecting the surface world. If Doom manipulates that instinct, Shuri could suddenly find herself betrayed by someone she once considered an uneasy ally. And because Doom specializes in turning fractured relationships into complete disasters, this kind of political manipulation feels perfectly aligned with the character audiences know from the comics. What's especially interesting is that Marvel wouldn't need Namor to become an outright villain for this story to work. In fact, it becomes much stronger if he genuinely believes he's making the least destructive choice available. That's always been Namor's greatest complexity. He isn't driven by chaos or cruelty. He's driven by loyalty to his kingdom, even when that loyalty forces him into morally questionable decisions. Doom could easily recognize that weakness and frame himself not as a conqueror, but as the only leader capable of preventing total annihilation. If the multiverse is collapsing, if universes are literally crashing into one another, then impossible decisions suddenly become unavoidable. That's where Doom thrives. He doesn't simply ask people to betray their friends. He convinces them that betrayal is the only logical path left. If Namor reaches that conclusion, the consequences for Shuri could be devastating, not because Namor suddenly hates Wakanda, but because Doom successfully rewrites the entire moral equation. The audience would understand both perspectives, making the conflict infinitely more painful than a simple battle between heroes and villains. Should that chain of events unfold, it would naturally create the emotional foundation for Black Panther 3. Prince T'Challa wouldn't be stepping into the suit because someone handed him a title. He would inherit a kingdom forever changed by the actions of Doom, the sacrifices of Shuri, and the impossible choices made by those around them. Marvel has always told its strongest stories through legacy. Steve Rogers inspired Sam Wilson. Tony Stark inspired Peter Parker. T'Challa inspired Shuri. Now, the next generation has the opportunity to carry those ideals forward while confronting entirely new threats. Reports also suggest that Denzel Washington will join the cast of Black Panther 3, a development that has only fueled even more speculation about where Wakanda's future is heading. Whenever an actor of Denzel's caliber enters the MCU, audiences naturally expect a role with enormous narrative importance. Whether he becomes a wise mentor, a political figure, or someone with connections to the larger cosmic side of Marvel remains unknown. But his presence alone signals that Marvel sees Black Panther 3 as something far bigger than a routine sequel. Even more intriguing are the rumors surrounding the film's primary antagonist. Instead of focusing on another earthly conflict, speculation suggests that Black Panther 3 may introduce a genuine space-level threat. If that's true, it represents a major shift for Wakanda's future. The first Black Panther explored isolation versus global responsibility. Wakanda Forever dealt with grief, succession, and international tension. A cosmic threat would elevate Wakanda into an entirely different arena, placing its heroes alongside the expanding roster of characters preparing for the mutant saga. And that transition makes perfect sense. By the time Secret Wars concludes, the MCU itself is expected to look dramatically different. New realities, New heroes, new teams, and perhaps even a completely rewritten timeline could become the foundation of Marvel's next decade. Characters like Prince T'Challa, Ghost Rider, the Fantastic Four, and the X-Men won't simply exist alongside one another. They'll define what the post-multiverse Marvel universe looks like. When you step back and connect all of these developments, an interesting pattern begins to emerge. None of these announcements feel isolated. Doctor Doom's arrival, Tony Stark's mysterious connection, Loki's hidden mission, Ghost Rider's rumored debut, Prince T'Challa's future, the expansion toward mutants. Every single piece appears to be moving toward the same destination. Marvel isn't simply introducing new characters because the old generation is gone. It's carefully building a bridge between two completely different eras. The Infinity Saga was built around a handful of heroes learning how to become a family. The Multiverse Saga has been about fractured realities, broken timelines, and impossible choices. The era beyond that may become something entirely new, a universe rebuilt from the ashes of everything that came before, where legacy matters just as much as power. That's why Doom feels like such an appropriate central villain. He isn't just threatening the heroes. He's threatening the very idea of history itself. By reshaping reality, erasing memories, and forcing every hero to question who they are, Doom attacks the one thing every franchise depends on: its legacy. And maybe that's the biggest reason Robert Downey Jr.'s casting feels so brilliant. Marvel didn't simply bring back the actor who launched the MCU to create headlines. They brought him back because no other face could represent everything the Marvel Universe stands to lose. Tony Stark symbolizes hope, sacrifice, innovation, and redemption. Doctor Doom symbolizes control, obsession, superiority, and absolute power. Placing those two ideas inside the same face instantly creates one of the most emotionally layered conflicts Marvel has ever attempted. Every time audiences look at Doom, they'll remember Iron Man. Every time the Avengers look at Doom, they'll remember the friend they buried. And every time Doom exploits that emotional weakness, he'll remind everyone that the greatest victories aren't always won with strength. Sometimes they're won by forcing your enemies to fight their own memories. Of course, it's important to remember that many of these details are still based on reports, industry updates, and ongoing rumors rather than officially confirmed plot points. Marvel has built its reputation on protecting major surprises, and history has shown that even the most convincing leaks can evolve before a film finally reaches theaters. But that's exactly what makes this period so exciting for fans. Every interview, every casting announcement, every carefully worded response from an actor becomes another puzzle piece. And occasionally, a simple refusal to answer a question tells us far more than an entire trailer ever could. Whether Doom truly removes his mask before Steve Rogers, whether Tony Stark's real return waits until Secret Wars, whether Ghost Rider rides into the multiverse's final battle, or whether Prince T'Challa eventually becomes Wakanda's next protector, one thing is becoming increasingly clear. Marvel isn't just preparing another crossover event. It's preparing a story designed to challenge everything audiences thought they understood about identity, legacy, memory, and sacrifice. And honestly, if that vision becomes reality, Avengers Doomsday may not simply be remembered as the movie where Doctor Doom finally arrived. It could be remembered as the moment the Marvel Cinematic Universe stopped looking backward at its greatest hero and started asking what his legacy truly means when the greatest villain in Marvel history wears the exact same face. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, share it with fellow Marvel fans, and subscribe to Filmcast for more deep dives, breakdowns, and cinematic Marvel theories. And if you'd like to help support the channel even further, consider sending a $25 super thanks. Your support genuinely helps us keep creating bigger and better content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.